What are your views on the Snowden affair and the NSA's global surveillance programs?
I mean, my own opinion is that Snowden should be honored. He was doing what every citizen ought to do. He was telling Americans what the government is doing. That's what's supposed to happen. Governments, as I mentioned before, always plead security, no matter what's going on. The reflexive defense is security. But anyone who's looked at, first of all, you take a look at what he exposed, at least anything that's been published, is not any kind of a threat to security, with one exception, the security of the government from its own population. And in fact, if you look at anyone who's spent any time poring through declassified records, I have, I'm sure many of you have, you find that overwhelmingly the security is the security of the state from its own population. And that's why things have to be kept secret. There are some cases where there's authentic security concerns, but they're pretty limited. The plea of the U.S. government in this case for the surveillance and so on is that it's security against terror. But at the very same moment, the U.S. policy is designed in a way to increase terror. I mean, the U.S. itself is carrying out the most awesome international terrorist campaign ever, I suppose, the Drone Special Forces campaign. That's a major terrorist campaign all over the world. And it's also generating terrorists. And you can read that and hear that from the highest sources, General McChrystal, scholars, and so on. Of course, the drone campaign is creating potential terrorists. And you can easily understand why. I mean, if you're walking through the streets of Geneva and you don't know whether 5 minutes from now there's going to be an explosion across the street that's run a couple thousand miles away and it'll blow away some people and whoever else happens to be around, you're terrorized. And you don't like it. And you may decide to react. And that's happening all over the regions that are subjected to the Obama terror campaign. So you can't seriously, on the one hand, be not only carrying out massive terror, but even generating potential terrorists against yourself and claim that we have to have massive surveillance to protect ourselves against terror. I mean, that's a joke. It should be headlines. But then comes the interesting question of extradition. The U.S. has just announced again that they're going to punish anybody who refuses to extradite Snowden. At the same time, the U.S. is one of the leaders in refusing extradition. Bolivia is an interesting case. The U.S. wanted to, impose pressure at least to try to, how much pressure we don't know, but pressure to try to block the Bolivian plane because they want Snowden extradited. For years, Bolivia has been trying to extradite from the United States the former president, who's already indicted in Bolivia for all sorts of crimes. The U.S. refuses to extradite him. In fact, it's happening right in Europe. Italy has been trying to extradite 22 CIA agents who were involved in and, in fact, indicted for participating in a kidnapping in Milan. They kidnapped somebody, sent him off, I think, to Egypt to be tortured. Agreed later he was innocent, but to extradite the people involved, the U.S. of course refuses. And there's case after case like this. I don't want to waste your time on it, but there are a lot of cases where the U.S. just refuses. In fact, one of the most striking cases is Latin America. Again, not just Bolivia. One of the world's leading terrorists is Luis Posada, who was involved in blowing up a Cubana airliner, which killed 73 people, and lots of other terrorist acts. And he's sitting happily in Havana, in Miami. His colleague, Orlando Bosch, also a major terrorist, recently died, was happily there. Cuba and Venezuela are trying to extradite them, but, fat chance. So for the U.S. to be calling for others to extradite Snowden is, let's say, a little ironic. Again, these ought to be headlines.